All right, guys, while you are writing a few more questions for us, we're going to go for another question that we did receive previously. And this one was on Instagram. And this question is about the best time for traveling in New Zealand. So on Instagram, Rachel Lovelacy asked, "Hi, I've been watching your video on the weather in New Zealand, and I'm looking to visit in late May, June, early July from the UK. I was wondering if you recommend this time of the year, even though I know you say there are 4 seasons in one day at any time of the year. I'm thinking it may be better to wait and go in the summer, but it will mean I need to wait until after I have finished uni in 4 years. Hell no. Also, what sort of time frame would you recommend? I was thinking 5 to 6 weeks. Hope you can help. Thanks."
That was a long question.
Yeah. All right. So Rachel Lovelace. I'm going to call you Rachel. Okay. Yeah. So Rachel, you're asking about basically the best time for traveling in New Zealand. The first thing is the best time for traveling in New Zealand is now. Don't wait 4 years. It's absolutely nonsense.
Yeah.
You know, like there is a lot of things changing in New Zealand. You know, the glaciers are receding, and you know, every year I feel like there is a little bit less wildlife because of human interaction and all of that. So you want to come to New Zealand right now for sure. Now, obviously, there are different seasons in New Zealand, but I think the most important thing that you need to keep in mind is about tourist seasons. So what are the tourist seasons in New Zealand?
So the peak season in New Zealand, meaning the busiest season, the high season, the season that everyone wants to come to New Zealand, is during the New Zealand summer, which runs between December to February. But the actual busyness of the season actually goes into March. Yeah, that's the peak season. There's also shoulder seasons in New Zealand where it's kind of in between the high and the low season. And that's between March and June, so the season going into winter. And between September and November, so that's more around springtime. So that's where you'll get like probably a little bit more favorable weather, but it's not too crowded. And then finally, the off-season, otherwise known as the low season or the quiet season, that is between June and August, which is the winter season in New Zealand. So do you want to go through the seasons?
So now what we're going to do, we're going to go through every seasons for New Zealand, and we'll tell you basically what are the kind of the pros and cons of traveling within those seasons. So first up is summer, and that's December, January, February, if I'm correct. Sometimes I do mistakes, but yeah, I'm correct. Right, okay, so the pros of traveling in summer, obviously it is the best weather. You know, you're gonna get good weather between 15 to 25 degrees Celsius. I have no idea what it is in Fahrenheit. But yeah, so you're gonna get kind of the best kind of weather at this time of the year, that's for sure. And also another pros of traveling in summer is that you're going to have everything open. So New Zealand is still a relatively small country with a lot of relatively small towns. So there is going to be a lot of places that kind of close during the winter, for example, just because they don't have as much business. So you know that everything is open at this time of the year. So that's kind of like the obvious kind of like two pros of traveling in summer. Now the cons of traveling in summer, and for me and for actually us, they outweigh the pros, right? But the cons are the fact that there is much more people. It's the high point of the tourism season in New Zealand. This is when you have the most tourists. This is when the tours are the most crowded. This is where the holiday parks are the most crowded. This is where the hotel are a bit the more crowded. So you can definitely feel like, you know, it's heaving in New Zealand. The other thing is that it's much more expensive to travel in New Zealand at this time of the year because all the prices are at their highest. Especially when we think about accommodation or car and camper van rentals, the price can, you know, sometimes be multiplied by 10. We have seen camper van, you know, dropping in summer, being about $200, while in winter there would be 20 per day. It's quite incredible. So you've got to work that into your budget. And another con is that you need to book more things in advance. So you're much more tied to, you have to stick to your itinerary, you have to do your own, this thing. And you never really have this feeling of like, I'm alone in the middle of the New Zealand wilderness. So that's basically why summer is not necessarily our favorite time of the year to travel in New Zealand. Spoiler alert, it's going to be spring and autumn. But let's...
oh my god, damn.
But let's move on to the next season, which is going to be autumn. Go for it, Laura.
So autumn in New Zealand is between March and May. And this is a pretty good time, in our opinion, to travel in New Zealand because the weather's still pretty good. It's usually around 11 to 20 degrees Celsius. And still pretty consistent. So you're not getting like a crazy amount of change in weather. It's usually like, the same sort of weather for a couple of days and then it changes. So so you can maybe predict the weather a little bit more compared to winter, and it's still warm enough after summer. This also means that the crowds are dying down a little bit because obviously we've gone out of the peak season and we're now in the shoulder season in New Zealand. So that means that, the walking trails are a little bit quieter and it's just a little bit more pleasant when you're visiting some of the free or natural attractions around New Zealand. And also, some of the autumn colours are starting to come out. So there's some really famous places around New Zealand like Wanaka and in the Otago, well, that is the Otago region, but around the Otago region, there's a lot of trees with autumn colours. Hawke's Bay as well, they get really like autumny grasslands and stuff. So it's a good season to see some sort of different landscapes in New Zealand, which is really awesome. I'm just gonna see if there's anything I missed from that. So obviously because it's getting out of the peak season, that means that some of the prices for like camper van rentals and accommodations, they start to be a little bit more affordable. So it's a good time to come to save some money. And just thinking about disadvantages, sorry, my memory is not as good as yours, Robin.
The weather is slightly cooler, that's for sure, in autumn. You start getting a little bit more rain, so it's a little bit more unpredictable. That's what it is. But I feel like it is still extremely manageable. And if I were to pick another disadvantage, I think I would go for the prices. I think that the prices are much lower than what it is in summer for sure, but they're not as low as it would be in winter. So you kind of like, should I have waited an extra month and get, even cheaper prices? So it's kind of like, this is kind of where you stand. Also the days are getting shorter as well, so and the nights get a little bit chillier, so that's maybe if you're in a camper van or if you're camping or anything, it's not as comfortable as it would be in summer, for instance. And also that peak season is actually getting longer and it is creeping into March and even April, so even sometimes when you think it is going to be quiet in some places, it does end up being quite busy. So like each year there's more and more tourists coming to New Zealand, so it's getting a little less easy to predict whether it's going to be busy or not. All right, so we're moving on to winter. So traveling in winter, spoiler alert, I do really like it, but it's not ideal, but I do really like it. So now the main point of traveling in New Zealand in winter is that you start getting some snow. You get plenty of snows all around the south, and it's really awesome. If you're into ski fields, obviously, and skiing, you're gonna have a blast over there. Some of the best ski fields in the country include Coronet Peak, the Remarkables, Mount Ruapehu, Treble Cone. So you got some really awesome places where you can go skiing, snowboarding, and enjoying all that goodness. Another awesome good thing about traveling in winter is that the prices of everything are at their lowest, aside from actually if you want to be in Queenstown, because this is where all the ski buffs are spending time in. So you're going to get really cheap as camper van rental. It goes as low as $19 a day, which is absolutely epic. All the accommodations are going to be really cheap, and also because it is the low tourist season, you're going to have no one else around, which is really awesome. I do really like traveling in New Zealand in winter because I get to do twice more than I can do in summer. Now, obviously, there are some disadvantages. The first disadvantage, and I know it's not the main one, but the first disadvantage that I will think of is that the fact that you have to pack so much more. You have to pack some extra layers. You have, like traveling in winter requires basically a slightly bit bigger backpack. For that reason, well, you need to plan a little bit more ahead. Speaking of planning ahead, a a really good pro for traveling winter. You don't have to plan ahead because nothing is fully booked, so you get it all for yourself. Anyway, get back to the con of traveling in winter. The days are much shorter because obviously it's winter, so instead of having 13 hours of daylight that you're going to be enjoying and exploring amazing New Zealand, you're going to be reduced to like 10 or 9, and like, no, it's just not enough time. But that's basically one of the cons. Another con is the weather. Obviously, this is going to be when you're going to have the most rain, when it's going to be the coldest. But honestly, this is nothing that a rain jacket can stop. And the cold is really not that bad. A couple of merino wool layers and you'll be completely sweet with that. And you've seen us traveling 365 days around New Zealand in only 365 days. Doing 365 activities. Sorry about that. So we actually did manage to do activities even in winter. We didn't cheat. Honestly, we didn't stop. So this literally is 365 consecutive days doing 365 activities. And we did that every single day. Nothing stopped us. Not the rain, not the snow and everything. And honestly, it wasn't too much of a hassle. It was absolutely awesome.
And someone just mentioned there's no mosquitoes in winter. So
that's a good one. Yeah. No mosquitoes in winter. Perfect.
No sandflies.
Yeah, the dreaded sandflies are not there in winter. And lastly, but not least, one of the cons of traveling in winter is that driving is maybe a little bit more scary, just because you may have some icy roads, the visibility because of fog or rain or snow may be a bit more scary. So you just have to be a little bit more careful. Honestly, I personally don't see that as a con because we are pretty careful drivers anyway. Yeah. But yeah, it's a tiny con that you may have. So yeah, traveling in winter, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, moving on to spring.
So finally, the second shoulder season in New Zealand is in spring, which is between September to November. And this is where, it starts to get a little bit warmer again, as spring is, that's what happens in spring. And the temperature will be somewhere between 7 degrees Celsius to 19 degrees. So it's getting more comfortable. And again, this is a pretty quiet time to travel in New Zealand, especially if you're more closer to September and November. That's like a really good time to September. Oh, there's October in there as well. Yeah,
just do that as well.
Yeah, it's a bit quieter. So yeah, but also personally, I feel like this is actually the best time to go to the ski fields in New Zealand because the winter's gone. All the ski fields have their base of snow, and then you get to have all those lovely sunny days up on the mountain skiing and snowboarding. So personally, I feel like spring is the best time to go and do those like winter sport activities in New Zealand. So that's in September, and then in the North Island it finishes in October. So also because it is a quieter time, it's less likely to have accommodation and rentals fully booked. You can be a little bit more spontaneous when you're traveling around. You don't need to necessarily book all your activities way in advance. You can maybe, check out the weather and stuff, see what it's doing before you book your activity. So that gives you a little bit more freedom in that respect. And also, in terms of the landscape, it's a pretty nice time to travel New Zealand as well, to see the flowers in bloom. But someone was just asking before about the lupins in Tekapo. They start to bloom around November, so that's in the springtime, for instance. There's lots of really nice gardens in the cities and stuff around New Zealand. So if you're into all that sort of stuff, that's a good time to come to New Zealand. And also the wildlife is a lot more abundant in spring. New Zealand is really known for its birds. So if you're out in the forest, you'll see a lot more lively activity when you're looking at birds and stuff. And very quickly, some disadvantages to spring is that the weather might be a little bit inconsistent, as it would be in winter. Usually, the 4 seasons in one day really happens during this time of the year in spring. And also there are a little less events going on. Summertime in New Zealand is where you'll find all the festivals and, outdoors events and things.
All the markets as well.
Yeah. But there's a little bit less of that going on in spring.
Yeah. All right, so just to recap, because I know that sometimes it can get a little bit confusing, I'm going to give you the months. So again, summer is December to February. Then after autumn is March to May, winter is June to August, and September is November. Sorry, spring is September to November. Now, all of those information right here is just to help you find which one of the pros and cons that you weigh the most. But for us, Rachel, I think that you should be traveling New Zealand as soon as you can, no matter the season. You'll have a blast. We did, and we still do, and it's really awesome. So that's basically it.
Absolutely.